This is Lightning Power Lunch, presented by Reef Rum on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
I don't think they're going to change much what we do just because we're playing a team at the halfway point that has 3 regulation losses. But, yeah, we're more concentrated on us. I mean, this is a team we play twice a year. We've already played them once, and it's... I just a believer in making sure we get our game over. And, yeah, sure, we're going to try and find things to, expose them, but I'm more worried about our game, not really theirs.
Oh, the coaches speak. I'm worried about our team, not them. How can you not, though? As Jon Cooper was talking about it regarding Colorado, who the Lightning will face tonight at Benchmark International Arena. It is Power Lunch on Lightning Radio. Greg Linnelli with you. That is not Dave Mishkin, but a very good friend of the show who does great work on the broadcast. You can also check out his work at lightninginsider.com. He's covered the Lightning organization for a long, long time and knows them as well as anybody. He is Erik Erlendsson, our good friend. It's great to be with you, buddy. Thank you for jumping in, and it always feels like you and I go back doing these shows and don't miss a beat.
No, but now I don't know how I'm going to live up to that introduction. Like,
Steve, feel free to cut his mic off, and we can probably move forward.
No,
the introduction. Now you got to live up to it.
Yeah, you put me under pressure on the spot. No, it's always great to be able to fill in and be invited on, and it's always great hockey talk when we get together.
Absolutely, and we're going to do that for the next hour. If people want to chime in, they can at Bolts Radio on X, but we see some questions starting to trickle in here that we're going to get to in a bit. It's funny. I think we've been around not only hockey for a long time, but other sports. And I think you do take the regular season games, particularly ones like hockey and MLB, a little bit of grain of salt because it is just one game in an 82-game season. But I think we agree that there are some games that have bigger implications or more meaning, whether it's the Florida Panthers that come into town or on the road. Those are always fun. The defending Stanley Cup champs, whoever that is always something you circle on the calendar. I think any game with Toronto is worth watching and having a little bit more fun when it comes to covering than other games. And then, obviously, as you get closer to the playoffs, if there are playoff implications brewing towards the end of that last week or so in the regular season, you're paying attention to it. But for the most part, the 82-game season, it is a marathon. We get it. But I do think tonight's game, there's a little extra juice. Colorado, they just pop. They do. Yeah. They're just one of those teams. And it's probably because of the star power and the fact they've been pretty successful, over the years. They've got Hall of Famers in that lineup. So do the Lightning. And I think it does break up the regular season. And when both teams are playing well, that makes for some fun talk. And let's see what happens. But how do you view a game like this tonight against Colorado?
It's got plenty of people's attention. I tell you that. I mean, Mike Kelly from Sports Logic has, talked about probably the best in the East versus best in the West right now. ESPN is talking about it. Like, you're seeing a lot of people kind of highlight this game tonight because of what it means. It's, in the grand scheme of things, it's 2 points against a non-conference opponent, but the Lightning are playing well. They've won 7 in a row. Colorado, 3 regulation losses at the halfway point of the season. 3? That's ridiculous. That's incredible. Yeah, that's incredible. Now they got 7 overtime losses kind of spread in there. But to have 3 regulation losses at this time of the year, we always kind of use the term teams are a wagon. Well, the Avalanche have been a freight train this year. I mean, they've just kind of bullied over a lot of teams. And, McKinnon has just been their biggest factor in everything. I mean, you look at some of the numbers that he's been putting up. They're ridiculous numbers, right? And there's a reason why he's at the top of the MVP consideration so far this year. His plus-minus driving the team 5-on-5. And they had won 10 in a row before they got tripped up by Florida the other night in a 2-1 loss to the Panthers that they had. Now, they're without Devon Taves, who got hurt in the game against Carolina.
Right.
And then Gabe Landeskog got hurt. His skate kind of caught a rut.
Right.
And fell into the net, similar to what Seth Jarvis, what happened to him, similar type of injury. So Yeah, this is going to be a fun matchup, for a Tuesday night in January. It's the midway point of the season. You're kind of starting to get to the, a good friend Martin Fenley used to call them the sled dog days of the hockey season, right? It's kind of like we're only halfway through the season, but when you see a matchup like this come on your schedule with the way the Lightning are playing right now and the way the Avalanche have been playing all year, yeah, it's going to get a lot of people's attention. And I think we're all looking forward to see how this one goes tonight. And it was interesting listening to Jon Cooper yesterday, right? He's like, everybody talks about measuring sticks and how do we match up? He goes, I'm not necessarily concerned about that. I would just be disappointed if we don't play well against them. Right. So that's kind of how he's looking at it, because he knows with the way really this team has been playing for a good portion of the season, the Lightning, that if they play their way, their game in a consistent way that they have been, then they'll give themselves a chance. And that's what you want to see tonight out of Tampa Bay.
It is interesting with Colorado, when you have a regular season like this, how are you measuring that team? Because you mentioned there are some injuries. You look at their team and the numbers across the board are pretty incredible. You start then asking maybe yourself the question, all right, do they have a weakness? Is there a weakness with a team like this? I think immediately people would look maybe at the goaltending, just because, is it for real? Is that something you can win with moving forward? But maybe it is. Maybe it's not. I don't know. They've won one cup with that group, and McKinnon is going to go down as one of the all-time greats, I think, when it's all said and done. Probably very similarly to a guy like Connor McDavid from that perspective. Those two, there's a lot of conversations about them. But I'm curious, when you have a season like this, does it make you want to even be more active at the trade deadline to really just say, okay, here we are, we're going for it, and I like our team, but I like it a lot better if we can go out and get a couple more pieces? Or is it one of those where, if it's not broke, you don't need to fix it and just kind of keep it going? That's a tough question to answer, because you're not inside their head, but I'm curious, when you look at their roster and you say, are there really any weaknesses?
Well, I know the one thing in kind of following some of their reporters is the power play hasn't been very consistent this year. We're certainly very aware of what that
we have
looks
that story
like
here, right?
around here. So that's been the one area where they've actually kind of struggled. That's why their 5-on-5 numbers are so good, right? You look at all the plus minus and the goal differential and the 5-on-5 goal differential. I mean, they've just been a juggernaut in a lot of those areas on the ice this year. So it has been the power play that's kind of given them problems, which, Jesus, a Makar run power play with Nathan McKinnon and Marty Necas on it, and they're having problems scoring goals. It defies logic sometimes with the way they do. But yeah, I mean, we have seen this with teams that have had, what looks like is going to be a potentially historic season, right? We saw with the Lightning in 19, the Bruins did it a couple years ago, right? And now Colorado is having one of these type of seasons. We saw Julian's philosophy: if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Right. They didn't really go out and do anything at the trade deadline that year. He's like, hey, these guys have done the job. I want to see them finish it. Didn't turn out so well for Tampa Bay in that year, but it did kind of lead them to their 2 cups the following 2 seasons. And the Bruins, I don't think they made many changes that year either. So it will be curious to see how Colorado handles this moving towards the deadline, because, maybe you could have sat there and looked at their goaltending and say, Mackenzie Blackwood and Scott Wedgwood, those are the 2 guys you're going to lead. But you look at their numbers, right? Like, it's easy to say that those guys are products of their environment because Colorado is so good. But, as Chief tells us all the time, you look at the save percentage. Their save percentage has been really, really good. I think Wedgwood is about .917. The win-loss record is a win-loss record, but it's a save percentage. It's the goals against. I think it's a sub-2 goals against average, and certainly Blackwood was playing well before he got hurt. So those guys have been doing what they're asked to do, right? And that is stop the shots they're supposed to stop and maybe stop a few that they're not expected to. So you look at those numbers, it's just hard to see any weaknesses in this team, even with the power play numbers.
Sure. It makes sense. And, we have seen organizations win Stanley Cups without quote unquote a marquee goaltender in net. We always felt like, in fairness, when the Lightning were in any type of series, they did have the edge because of Vasi. And I still think that is true. But maybe it is the best of both worlds where you have a team who's so good, particularly 5-on-5, that when called upon, the goaltenders are making the saves that need to be made. But I'd be curious to see high danger chances. Is Colorado defending better than anybody in those areas? Are they controlling the puck a lot more and avoiding a lot of high danger chances too? Kind of like the Lightning have done before. To me, that would be interesting. I don't know. I just have an interesting, more of just an observation with Colorado, because I think when people generally look at their goaltending, you say, all right, well, Blackwood, maybe a run there a little bit with the Devils was okay. Wasn't great. And, of course, Wedgwood, I mean, you're like, okay. I mean, he was in the Lightning organization not too long ago, right? And look, maybe guys just they put it together. It can happen. It's unusual. It's unusual, I think, to have two goaltenders like that who aren't typically marquee guys having the season they're having. And that is a surprise. Kudos to them. Yeah. Did you see that one report, by the way, Pierre LeBrun, just like a couple of weeks ago in The Athletic? I happened to be reading his article when I had some free time. And he had mentioned that Marc-Andre Fleury could be an option to come to the Lightning as a backup. Did you see that?
Well, I didn't see that particularly. But yeah, I know that teams have reached out to him and asked, hey, are you interested in
what do you think of that? I mean, I get it.
I mean, you look at what he did last year, right? In his final year, like he had pretty good numbers, right? He played pretty well for, a goalie in his 40s, goalie at any age, really, for the numbers that he was putting up. But to hear, I don't know about that. I don't know. Maybe somewhere, but I can't see it here. I mean, every time Jonas Johansson's gone in the net, we've talked about how good he's been, and despite what the numbers say, right? Like he's been pretty good in terms of keeping the game within reach and giving his team a chance to win. I mean, in that game against Montreal, he was fantastic in that game. It's just the tired team in front of him just couldn't kind of hold it together long enough to get that game to the finish line in regulation. But I just Fleury here. It's hard for me to see, but stranger things have happened.
It is, and I tend not to put a ton of stock in that, but when it comes from him, or an Elliot Friedman, sometimes is their ear to the ground a little bit more, and maybe they're hearing something. I don't know. It was just certainly an observation. I thought that was pretty interesting. Alan says, very excited about tonight's game, a mid-season clash of the Titans. Dave and Greg, of course, here to answer that question. Besides not having penalties, what is the best way to contain McKinnon and Makar? Make sure you say your prayers at the beginning of the day. It's easy. Look, I'll go for. I want to hear what you say. It's easy to sit there and say be physical with them, because McKinnon is a physical guy. Makar can skate. Easier said than done. I will just tell you in general, particularly when you have a very good defenseman who plays a lot of minutes, and that can be Victor Hedman. It could have been Erik Karlsson when he was doing his thing, particularly with Ottawa. Doughty, whatever. Teams, especially in a 7-game series, you're looking at that and saying, okay, can we be physical with them? And every time they get the puck, can you just hit them? Can you make them feel it?
Yeah. Easier
said than done. Of course that is. But that would be one thing that would stick out for me, is when you have an opportunity to be physical, and particularly in a series, maybe that has some after effects.
Sometimes, though, it's hard to hit what you can't catch. Right? That's where the easier said than done part comes into it. To me, I think the biggest thing, especially with McKinnon, it's almost sort of the same approach as you try and have to have against McDavid. You have to limit their open ice. And whether that's being physical or making sure your gaps are there, not letting them wind up with speed. I mean, think about the game Edmonton was here, right? McDavid didn't really get loose, but he did once. He came up through the neutral zone with some serious speed, the puck on a stick, and boy, did he kind of weave his way in and created an absolutely dangerous chance in that game. So you're never going to limit those guys for an entire game, but you have to limit the opportunities that they get as much as possible because they are so incredibly fast with the puck. Right, that's the thing. They're fast skaters, and there's a lot of fast skaters in this league. But what those guys can do with the puck on their stick at that high rate of speed, other than maybe Bobby Orr, I'm not sure we've seen any players that can do it with that type of speed. Mario probably comes into my mind as somebody that could do it with the speed. So you have to make sure that your gap control is paramount. You can't. It's a dangerous line. Like, you can't be too far back, but you can't be too close either because they'll just go right around you, right? So to me, the hardest thing to do is to slow those guys down in the neutral zone, but that's where you're going to have to do it and make sure you have guys near them so they don't have the opportunities to generate the type of speed that they can, and just make sure that they don't have as much open ice as they want to have to create opportunities. And they're going to create opportunities. You just have to limit them.
I think that's fair. You know, it's not like in football you can do time of possession in terms of keeping one part of the team off the field. You know, you're not going to have that. Like McKinnon, unless he's in the penalty box and you're forcing him to commit some infractions, he's going to be on the ice, and probably in high-stake games, partner, he's probably going to be going over 25, 26 minutes, depending on, you know, where you are. But I do think that's one of those where Chief talks about this a little bit. You know, the East-West game probably has to be cut in half. Oh, yeah. Got to go more north and south. You can't have turnovers where you're on your backhand in your own zone and you're trying to go up the ice, use the boards to your advantage. Be smart. I mean, I know that, again, easier said than done when you have guys flying around, but, you know, to me that probably makes a lot more sense. But I think it's going to be interesting tonight. You would think Cirelli, right, maybe has the task of going against McKinnon, and we'll see. Well, then again,
that'll be interesting.
Well, the other thing too is, you know, the fourth line, because of their skating abilities, do they take on more of that role if you want to free up Cirelli in his line, depending on who he's playing with, you know, because you want to preserve some there. Do you have any thoughts on that before we get to our next question?
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, Coop kind of talked about that a little bit yesterday about how the Gord, Girgensons, and Holmberg line kind of have taken some of the matchup games within games, right? Like that's been the line that he's kind of turned to, especially of late, to kind of go against the other team's top line, because it does free up Cirelli, Hagel, and, you know, currently Gensel playing with those two guys to just take those. Not take some of the responsibilities away from them, but to give them more of a two-way type of game rather than just trying to concentrate on shutting down McKinnon in tonight's game. So my guess is that they'll try the Gord line first and see how they do against it, because let's face it, one of the strengths of that line is the way that they can control the play in the offensive zone, right? Their ability to protect the puck and the ability to get under the forecheck and everything they do. And sometimes, you know, you talk about trying to limit guys like McKinnon. That's certainly one way to do it. Make them play on their own end, right? Keep the puck down on their end so that they can't create opportunities at the other end of the ice. So my guess is we'll see Gord's line try and get that first opportunity if they don't have it, at least. And that's why, you know, we talked about on the California trip about the presence of that line and why they're so good on the road is because, okay, if the Gord matchup isn't going to work, you have Cirelli that you can do it, or vice versa, right? Especially on the road, right? So you have that kind of in your back pocket if you're Jon Cooper and the coaching staff when it comes to trying to get matchups in a game like this tonight, which is on home ice.
Yep. I think that's an interesting development, being able to free up Cirelli from so many of those hard assignments if the fourth line or, you know, the Gord line can do a little bit more, because they can all skate that fourth line. That helps, you know, when those guys can go out there. And they are physical. So I get that. That's a really good point. FKA says Lightning have been playing great on this streak, but what do you see as potential cracks in their armor?
Well, face-offs. We've talked a lot about face-offs, especially on that trip to California where they were not very good despite winning all three games. Right? It was funny because we had talked about that pregame, right? And then the stat that Scripps put up, I texted it to you afterwards. They're like 7-0 when they're like under 40% in face-off wins. It defies logic a little bit sometimes. But sometimes that's just a testament to how good this team really is. But it's the special teams faceoffs. That's a big problem, right? It's a big reason why the penalty kill is kind of leaking a little bit of oil here of late has been because they're starting to lose those faceoffs right to start the power play. So you give that possession right away to the other team, and conversely, they're not winning their power play faceoffs, right? So you lose a faceoff, puck gets cleared, you have to regroup. You just lost at least 20 seconds in trying to set up your power play, and that's if you can get back in the zone. So I think faceoffs, especially on special teams, has been an issue that you kind of need to look at and say they need to be better at it. Other than that, it's hard to find too much wrong with how they've been playing. The penalty kill again has been a great strength all year. It's led in some goals here, like 2 against LA, which came in as the worst power play team in the league. But to me, it's the faceoffs. That's the biggest thing that they have to be better at consistently, because it's such a wild swing sometimes. You'll have guys that'll go 15 for 20 one night and then 5 for 20 the next. And that's, sometimes that's based on who you're matched up against. But, the best faceoff guys in the league, doesn't matter who they're matched up against, they find ways to win draws consistently. And that just hasn't been the case for Tampa Bay this year.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting situation. We've kind of talked about this multiple times on multiple platforms, that if you identify the power play and the faceoffs as the issue so far through 41 games, and I think it'd be fair to say they haven't performed to where the Lightning would like it to be. So the next question is, do you think you can improve from within? And if not, do you need to make a trade? I think the power play can improve from within.
Yeah.
I think Radish has shown some things. I also don't think we saw the best of Hedman. And perhaps the injury had something to do with it. Absolutely. I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt that, okay, yeah, I know you don't have Stamkos on the other end, bombs away with the one-timer, but I think there's enough talent there and enough history that shows me, while it may not be the number one power play in the league, it can be better than what it is right now without having to go out and get a piece. Because I think if you go out and get a piece to explicitly help the power play, most likely that forward is in the top 6 or in the top 9, correct? Yeah. I mean, you're not getting a guy on the fourth line to improve your power play. So then you're going to have to do some roster shuffling. So that would be my answer to the power play. The face-off, I think, is more of an interesting question. Because I don't know if they have somebody who is a quote-unquote great face-off man. Could their numbers improve? I think so. But I don't think it's uncommon for teams who feel like they're a piece or two away to go out and get somebody who's pretty good in the face-off circle.
Yep.
We've seen that.
Yep.
The question is, what do you want to give up, and where would they play?
Yeah.
Because the strength of this team has been their depth, not only on the back end, but at the forward position. And are you trading somebody off of the roster to bring in that face-off guy to find room for them to play? That's going to be the conundrum.
Well, and if you do that, if you bring in a guy that's a quote-unquote face-off specialist, we talked about it, he has to be able to play. And he's not coming in to solve the power play, because that's a top 6 center, right? That's most likely is a top 6 center that's coming in to win faceoffs. And I just don't know if you're willing or have the assets to give up a guy who's got that kind of a well-rounded game, who's going to fit into your top 6, unless you're moving guys off of your roster. So you had Luke Glendening the last couple years, right? But you're not putting him out for a power play 5-on-5 with 5 minutes to go. You're down by 1, right? Because he's just not a power play guy. He could win a faceoff for you, but he's not a power play guy. You want your top offensive guys out there. And so I think that has to come from within on a faceoff or the power play. Nick Paul is seeing some second power play duties, right? He's been the guy the last couple years that you can kind of look at and say, well, he can consistently win faceoffs. And even he's had some of those up and down games of late, right? Like he's been great one night and the next night he's, 35, 40%. So I just, it's hard for me to think like you want that guy who's a defensive specialist who can win draws because you can throw him out late in games when you're protecting leads. Again, I brought it up that he's not in the league anymore, but Antoine Vermette was kind of that guy who was a hired gun for teams at the trade deadline because he was a consistently 60% guy in the faceoffs and he was very good defensively.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why he was a player that a lot of teams sought. With this team, you would hate to think that with some of the difficulties they've had in the circle this year, that could cost you a playoff series. Right. So I think that's what you kind of have to have in the back of your mind because it's situational faceoffs too. Like it's funny, like power play faceoffs, they're actually above 50%, but they're like 24th in the league. So that shows you how good you have to have a player who can win faceoffs consistently for you in the power play if you're going to have the opportunity to maintain that possession coming off that opening draw. I'm
going to make a bold prediction now.
Like
we've kind of hinted at this, I think, again, on various platforms you and I have talked about. But the more we talk about it, I think the Lightning have something pretty special with this group. I don't know if we thought they had the depth that they currently have at the beginning of the year compared to where they are right now. I think their goaltending is very solid. I basically think they're as buttoned up as you can be in a parity-driven league. And so if that's the case, you say to yourself, and we know Julian is very aggressive at the trade deadline. He's basically done that every year. That, all right, I got to do everything I can to make sure my team wins a cup. I feel like this year is just as good as any, maybe even better. I think they end up making a bigger move with some of these pieces that they have to address that. Now, maybe you don't have to, but how many defensemen do they have? Legitimate NHL defensemen right now. 8 or 9?
Even with 3 on the uninjured reserve.
Yes. I mean, include those guys coming back. They all can't play.
Yep.
They just can't. And part of those guys, part of what makes it exciting is that not only can they help you on the ice, but they can also help you off the ice. If you can't keep everybody. Yep. McDonough comes back, he's going to play. Chernak, we've seen him. He's playing. Right? Hedman comes back, he's not sitting.
Yep.
Are you going to sit Radish?
Not now.
No.
Nope.
It doesn't
even count Lillibert.
What's going to happen when Lillibert comes back?
Yeah.
What about Crozier? You think the Stu who just signed a contract, is he coming out of the lineup? How about Moser? He's been your best defenseman. But it's a good problem to have because now, I mean, you're 9-10 deep. It's okay to part ways with some of these guys if you feel like, I mean, the goal is to win, and it's to win now. And if you can find somebody out there who'd be willing to overpay for something that you need, I think you really have to take a hard look at it. And I think they do. I do. I don't know who that player is. I think it comes from the back end, but I don't think anybody anticipated this type of depth.
No, and some of this too, as you think about it, like they've been incredible showings of depth, right? Which we didn't anticipate, especially in the back end. I mean, Declan Carlisle, right? Every time he had a tough game the other night, but most of the time you see him on the ice, you see the growth and the improvements and everything that Declan Carlisle's bring. But is he going to bring back an asset that you need? Right? Is Max Crozier going to bring back an asset that you need? They're not high enough to bring in what you think you might need. Right now,
that's a fair point.
You package things,
maybe a draft pick, maybe another player down in Syracuse, right?
As we know, the Lightning don't have many first-round draft picks in the next.
Yeah, what are they to the Lightning? Right. we're talking 2035 at this point, right?
Yeah, we're getting close to that part. But that brings up the question of Darren Radish, right? Like if you're talking trade value, it's never going to be higher. Right. But he's also been extremely valuable to this team this year, especially in the past, 8 weeks with the injuries and the role that he's been elevated to. Now his shots are getting on net and they're going into the net. Obviously the hat trick stands out the other night.
It's a great point, because I think early on he would have been somebody who wasn't playing that you could have looked at and said, okay, he's got some NHL experience, maybe another team who needs a depth piece. And look, you can't dismiss contract year.
Nope.
You just can't dismiss it. That's all baked into the cake. I actually don't think they do move him, because to your point, I think they need him.
Yeah, and he's been so good with Moser.
Now, it's an interesting question for next year, because I think when you get to free agency, most of the time, particularly if you end up changing teams, the team that brings you in overpays. That's just what happens in free agency. Yep. You overpay. That's one of those you have to be very careful about. I know the cap is going up. I don't think that's one of those contracts, and I'm just throwing out a random number. You can't go 6 years, $30 million. I think that would hurt you.
Yeah,
I do.
And let's remember too, Darren Radish is not 24 years old.
No, he's not.
Right,
he's not.
He's almost 30.
He's going to be 30, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he's a late bloomer.
He is. But those are the type of contracts that you really have to be careful about. So what's the best of both worlds? Obviously, he plays well, he stays here, and he signs an affordable contract, maybe to stay with Tampa Bay. But if you can't get to that part, that second part, I still think he's here with you, because I think he has proven that he is very capable. And you know what? Take advantage of the fact that he's playing in his last year, because he's going to want to maximize everything for his benefit.
And that's kind of been Julian's MO a little bit too, right? Like if you explore taking somebody out of your lineup that has been so valuable to you, what does that do to the team? Yeah. Are you still giving your team the best chance to win? Because that ultimately is Julian's philosophy. What am I doing to give this group of players the best opportunity to win another Stanley Cup? So that's where you have to ask yourself, the way Darren Radish is playing, does he give you the best chance to win another Stanley Cup? Or depending on what you could potentially bring in, I mean, there's a lot of questions surrounding this year and beyond, right? Because you look, I mean, they just extended Moser. They just gave Dastu the contract extension, right? Lilleberg has taken a step forward this year before the injury and playing the right side.
Yeah,
right. Him and Dastu were a pretty good pair with Lilleberg on the right side. So it's all of a sudden becoming a very crowded sort of blue line, which I don't think we anticipated at the start of the year.
No, I think it's a good point. At Bolts Radio, if you want to get involved in the conversation, Tampa Bay says there has been some talk from insiders like LeBrun who could see Blake Coleman coming back to Tampa. And I think he's playing on an expiring contract, correct? Coleman? I don't know how much term he has left.
Yeah.
We'd have to have our... Jared, reach out to Blake, see if he wants to comment on what his contract status is. Blake Coleman coming back, fine, if that's the rumor. I think my question would be, do you need him?
Yeah.
Is that
He's
a
not
need?
A face-off guy.
Yeah, is that a need?
He's a winger.
Yeah. I told you, I think the guy, if you're really going to go with the forward position, who I think would add a ton of juice, because I think he plays the right way. Coleman one more year at 4.9. I'd go out and get Brian Rust. Brian Rust would be the perfect Lightning player. He kills penalties. He's in a top 9. He plays hard. He can score. Playoff performer, as we know. I'd have to look at what his contract is. He may have... Jared, go look that one up too. But, I know the Penguins are kind of in a playoff spot. I think that's kind of a surprise to some. There was talk Raquel and Rust, but I feel like Rust would look really good in a Lightning uniform because of the way he plays. 2 more years of 5.1.
So there's the dilemma if you're any team in the Eastern Conference. Even if you're 15th in the conference, do you feel like you're out of a playoff spot? I mean, everybody's
You're
within
right
like
now.
3
No,
points,
yeah, right, yeah.
right. Like so, like, but that also changes by the week. Pittsburgh could be in a playoff position today. If they go on a 3-game losing streak, they'll be down to 15. Right. So there's going to be so much of that movement here as long as this first half type of parity continues into the second half that, is Pittsburgh going to part with a guy that they feel could get them to the playoffs? And I mean, with Crosby and Letang, and I saw Malcolm was back on the ice with them today, at least back from, getting close to coming back from his injury. Like they feel they could be a team that makes playoffs. Right. So, like, are they going to be willing to move a Brian Rust, who's very important to their team? I mean, it's a great point, and it's hard for me to say to you, but but Rust,
I love it.
I mean, look, yeah, he would be a perfect fit for this team,
And you'd have to give something good going back, like
a lot.
Dubas wants young talents, so
Yeah.
you're dipping into Syracuse, and you're probably dipping into a Dominic James or a Gage Gonsalves going back. That's kind of the player I think. Look, this is I'm spitballing, but this is kind of reading the tea leaves. If that were to happen, that's what you would have to give up because Russ is playing in your top 6.
Yep.
But he's a win now guy. I don't know if Pittsburgh's. Yes, they're in contention. Are they really in contention? The players are going to say yes. I think it's the job of the GM to say, okay, we get in. Do we have it? Do we have what it takes? So something to keep an eye on. This came about because somebody asked about Blake Coleman, and we were asking the question, what do we talk about? Jim says, I believe fans place too much emphasis on one game sample size versus a tough opponent. In my opinion, it is not a measurable benchmark of what a playoff series could be like. I think you're right. I think you know what it does, Jim? It gives us something to talk about during a long year. It's an 82-game season.
Yep.
You're bouncing around city to city, team to team, and it's nice to circle something on your calendar that's a little different than, hey, here comes Columbus. Here comes Ottawa. We're going out west to take on Anaheim. Okay, I mean, it's the Anaheim. I mean, we're interested in that, but Colorado gets your attention. It just does. It's nice to have those on the schedule. I don't know how to say it.
And certainly nobody is suggesting that whoever wins tonight's game is going to win the Stanley Cup.
No.
Right. And certainly winning this game does not mean you win the Stanley Cup. But it is a pretty good East versus West matchup, which we don't get too often. These two teams only play each other twice per year.
Yep.
Right. So, yeah, I think that we're not putting an overemphasizing this game, but it's a great matchup between two great teams in January. That's all this is.
There's a buzz in the air tonight.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say it. B-Love says it's impressive all the different ways this team has figured out how to win, even when they may not play that well. Do you think there is a chip on their shoulder over how the last few seasons have ended?
It's fair. I think just like the fans, I think they're tired of getting bounced in the first round. I think they feel that they have teams over the last couple of years that could have, 3 years ago when they lost to Toronto, they could have easily went on.
Yeah.
Right? They were the better team in that series. Toronto got the breaks. 2 years ago against Florida, Panthers were the better team. Last year, I think a lot of us felt that was a pretty even series. And there were many, including myself, who felt whoever wins that series probably represented the East in the Stanley Cup final. Happened to be Florida. I'd like to see what happened if we got that series tied 2-2 coming back to Tampa, right? And they give up the 2 goals in 13 seconds or whatever, and kind of killed the series. But this year they feel they have a good enough team to compete for a Stanley Cup. So does that kind of stick in your head a little bit? I think a little, but I don't think it's a driving force. I just think that they're trying to find ways to improve every single day.
Those are different teams today than they were 3-4 years ago, too. I mean, the core's there. Is there a chip on somebody's shoulder when it comes to like a Kucherov or a point that you get bounced, the Hedman? I think you're always disappointed because the expectations for this team every year is to win a cup. I do think, though, when you're coming off back-to-back and playing in a third final in a row, I do think the mission has been accomplished for a couple years if you don't get to the Stanley Cup final and win a cup. It's such a long year. And you've already done stuff that a lot of organizations haven't in today's era. So I think now is probably a good time to sit there and say, okay, enough of the first round losing. We can use some of that as an excuse. Hey, look, played a lot of hockey. We went to 3 straight finals. We won back-to-back cups. Yeah, you could forgive us if the next couple of years, we were trying to play, we were tired maybe and trying to figure this out. I think that part's gone. I think there is some motivation, as there is every year, but I think a little extra, like we got the team, didn't realize we have all this depth. I think things look pretty good. And the Eastern Conference, I think, is wide open too, by the way.
Yep.
I think that also helps. JJ says, Nick Paul was physical and nasty when he arrived here. Now he seems not nearly as physical. If he became more physical, might buy me more involved in the fight. He seems a bit off.
See, I don't agree with that. I don't think Nick Paul came here as a physical force.
Yeah.
We were talking about Nick Paul coming with between-the-leg goals and spin-around passes that kind of helped unlock his game a little bit.
Unbelievable.
He's big guy. He's a net front presence, but I would never consider him a physical, like that type of physical forward, right? I don't know if this is the Mystery Alaska effect. You're the big guy. Right. I don't know if that's how people look at Nick Paul and say, well, you're the big guy. You're supposed to be physical. Sure. Right. He can be. And, he can win wall battles and, he's hard to knock off the puck in the corners. But I wouldn't call him, a guy who's who's a physical forward. He could be a power forward. Right. And he's been a 20-goal scorer. But I don't know if I say that he's physical and that his game is off this year. I mean, he is coming back from missing the first 6 weeks of the season with the injury.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe that's affecting because it was his wrist that he had the surgery on.
Sure.
And look, his role is limited right now. He's essentially playing 4th line center. Right. He came back and he was 3rd line center, 2nd line wing. And right now, with the way that this team is constructed, especially with the Gord Gergensons and Holmberg line playing the way they do in the role that they have, his role's been kind of reduced, which means his ice time drops. So I would say that's the situation with Nick Paul.
I think Nick Paul also finds himself in a situation where he's got a lot of position flexibility up and down the lineup. One day he's on a 4th line centering Sabrin and Douglas, and then maybe on another night he's playing with Point and Kucherov. I think it's a valuable trait. I think it also can hurt you a little bit because you're not set in stone being on a line with regular line mates. I think there's a lot of tools in that toolbox. And I think for Nick Paul, he's always been somebody I think that has scored some big goals for this team. You're hoping that continues in games like tonight and in the playoffs. I do think his best position is at center.
I agree.
Take that for what it is.
Mm-hmm.
From where you go from there, I don't know if you feel like his best line mates, who they are, if we even have enough track record of saying who that would be.
Big guys like him, it's better when their feet are moving. And at the center position, you're more fluid rather than the guys along the boards who, have to start and stop so much from different areas. It's just a much more fluid. So I agree with that. I think his better position is center. He seems to play better with other bigger type players, right? I mean, think about how well he played with Connor Geekie the tail end of last year. I think Mitchell Chaffee was on that line for a little bit. Chaffee was a physical kind of guy, delivered a lot of hits for this team. He's a valuable player, and I think the versatility is what makes him even more valuable player. Need him to kill a penalty, he can kill a penalty. Need him to play in the power play, he can play in the power play. Need him to play wing, need him to play center, top 6, bottom 9. Like, there's a lot of things you can do with Nick Paul, and that makes him valuable.
Gosh, you brought up Geekie, and does it not feel like so long ago when he was up here with this team? He's almost a forgotten guy.
Chaffee, too.
Yeah, I mean, both of those guys. Duke to a lesser extent, but there was a lot of buzz coming out of camp with him. I mean, we start talking about trade pieces. Those are part of it, and the thing with Geekie, I do believe, people have asked this question. I know you've taken this as well, is like when he comes up, Does he need to be on a fourth line, or does he need to be in a top six? And if you believe he needs to be in a top six or in a top nine, the question is who you moving out.
Yeah.
But he's also a young guy who you don't want to give up on either.
Well, and he needs to play too.
Yeah.
Right. We forget he's 20 years old.
That's true.
He might be 21. I don't know exactly when his birthday is, but like the NHL was such a weird animal because you have guys like Celebrini who can come in as 18-year-olds and play the way that they do at a high level and take over games and put themselves in the MVP. But those are the unicorns. And we see, a few unicorns every now and then in the league, but we're so spoiled. We think that every first round draft pick should be able to come in and play right away. Right. And that's not always the case. Sometimes you do need a little time. And I think with Geekie, if he plays a fourth line role here, it's not benefiting him and it's not benefiting the team. Yes. Can he has the potential to provide 9 quality minutes a night? Yeah. But right now he's better served playing 22 in Syracuse, playing on the power play, right? Like he's playing in a lot of positions. He's getting valuable experience and growth down there. But yeah, could that be somebody that you use as a trade chip? For sure.
This might be a good question for you too. At Bar Down one time, not that I'm expecting him to come up, but is Sam O'Reilly going into our system after the OHL season? Memorial Cup. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we typically see in these situations with guys like O'Reilly, who, by the way, congratulations, he won a bronze medal with Team Canada, had 2 goals in the bronze medal clinching game yesterday for Canada. Typically, when those players' season ends and they're under contract and he has signed his entry-level contract, they come up and they finish out their season in Syracuse. He was a draft pick last year, so I don't know if he might still have one more year of junior eligibility left. Don't quote me on that. Either way, O'Reilly is not, again, he's not this type of player who's going to jump off the page at you, right? He's a solid 2-way, smart hockey player. It's a big reason why he was, chosen by Canada for the World Junior. It didn't hurt that his head coach, Dale Hunter, was also the head coach of Team Canada in London. But like we saw it here in the prospect camp, Sam O'Reilly does a lot of little things. There's a lot of little things to really like about his game that he's going to be a valuable Sorelli-ish type player moving forward.
Is he Sorelli light? Is he Sorelli light? Is he a better version of maybe like a Jack Finley? It's supposed to be a responsible two-way guy.
Level. Yeah, he's a higher level than Finley. I think he has the potential to be a Sorelli-like player. Right? He didn't. I mean, Sorelli, it took a while for him to hit the 20-goal mark, and then he hit the 27 last year. So we'll see what the offensive side brings to O'Reilly's game. But I think he's a guy who's a second, third line center in the NHL who can win some faceoffs. If you looked early in that tournament, late in games, especially that first game against Czechia, it was O'Reilly that was out there late in games taking draws in the defensive zone. Right. So there's a guy that, that certainly Dale Hunter can trust in those situations to be out there, not only defensively, but also to be in the faceoff circle. So you might get a look at him in Syracuse at the end of this year. Then we'll see where the chips fall next year when we get to training camp. But he will be a valuable player in this team's system moving forward.
What I'm putting you on the spot here, but I'm curious because you follow this more than I do in terms of prospects and who's in their system. Where is he like in their top 5 of prospects? And if you had to make a quick list off the top of your head, is he in that top 2, top 3?
Probably 1. He's probably one.
Yeah.
Right. Just because of the pedigree, first round draft pick, won a Memorial Cup last year, 2-way smart hockey player, can skate, right? Like, Geekie's probably right there in the top 5. Duke's probably right there in the top 5. Off the top of my head.
I mean, I guess you could say Geeky still, but I mean, he's had enough NHL maybe for us where I don't know if you'd.
Yeah, but he's still a prospect.
So where would you? I mean, I feel like he is the pedigree.
I think it's
might
O'Reilly
be higher
Geeky
for him. Yeah,
I think it's O'Reilly Geeky 1-2 in terms of where they're at, with their rankings, and we'll see. I do the Hockey News prospect issue, which usually comes out in March. So that'll be coming up soon.
Okay,
so
so
we'll get a better
must
idea
read.
of what other people, outsiders think of where
Yeah.
the Lightning prospects are at.
Speaking of prospects, Cameron says, speaking of defensemen, what are your thoughts on Lundmark getting called up from Syracuse today?
Well, hopefully it doesn't mean there's another injury to a right-hand shot defenseman.
That's the immediate.
I don't think that's the case, but we've been sort of conditioned to think that way this year with the way things have gone. He's a couple years older. He's not a 21, 22-year-old guy. He's been around a little bit. It's insurance, right? You always want to have that extra defenseman around just in case. We saw that with Groshev out in California. They wanted to make sure they had a seventh defenseman. So this is just insurance in case. And I don't know Syracuse's schedule this week off the top of my head, but Groshev going a whole week without playing, you don't want that guy going a whole week without playing. So you send him back, bring up Lundmark, just as insurance.
That's why he's here. He answers all of those tough questions for our audience. Before we get into more questions, tonight, enjoy some Refrum. Smooth, versatile, and now pouring at Benchmark International Arena. Order a Tropical Wave or a Lightning Mule and taste why fans are switching. Refrum is a premium craft Florida local rum built on authenticity, quality, and easy drinkability. Ask for Refrum by name. Go Bolts. Enjoy responsibly. Yeah, E is going to be joining me on the pregame and throughout the broadcast tonight. Lightning taking on the Avs. Pregame is going to start at 6:30. Paul says, let's be honest, Crozier, Carlisle, and even Lilleberg are going to sit when Hetty and Mack are back.
Carlisle will probably go back to Syracuse.
Fair point.
I think he has to go through waivers. But to suggest that Crozier and Lilleberg, I don't know, Lilleberg was coming on as a right-hand shot, or a right side D, rather, right? Him and Destu were a good pairing. It's going to come down to, I think it does come down to Crozier or Lilleberg, who sees the ice maybe a little bit more. But again, those are good problems to have. Right. Because Lilleberg was in the lineup when Hedman and McDonough were healthy. Now Destu wasn't here. He was started the season in Syracuse for sure. But yeah, I don't think anything is obvious. I can't sit here and say that, for sure this guy sits when those guys come back. I can't sit there and say that for sure. Other than Carlisle, right? Because he's probably 10th on the depth chart, and that's kind of how far deep down they've had to go this year. I don't think it's a clear cut for sure outside of Carlisle.
It's funny how we don't talk about Destu coming out at all. I mean, he's kind of, I don't know if it's because of the age too, when you look at him, you could make the case, does Carlisle and Crozier and Lilleberg, could they use a little more seasoning? Kind of the coaches speak a little bit when justifying their decision to send a player E down. But I think with Destu, that's not the case. Would you agree?
His first pass out of the zone is so good.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's always the underrated and under talked about part of a defenseman's game is what kind of plays can you make under pressure to get your team up the ice and moving out of the defensive zone. And Destu is so good at it. And he's 27 years old. He's got a number of years of pro experience under his belt. So he's seen a lot, right? So he understands and he knows his strengths. And, listening to him talk the other day when he signed the extension about how he wants to be a difference maker, you see the mentality that he has for a guy who, despite the accolades he's really had, whether it was in the minors here or over in Finland and Sweden where he played, he had never proven himself here. And now he's here. He's proven that he belongs here and that he can play here and he wants to continue. He's not satisfied. So that gives you a good insight into his mindset moving forward about, what he is capable of doing. And he can, and this kind of brings up an interesting situation with Radish. Now Radish is right-handed, Destu is left-handed, but Destu's a power play guy, right? He's kind of seen a little bit of time on the second power play unit, so where do things kind of shake out once Hedman does come back when it comes to the power play, right? I think you keep Radish on the top power play, but, because we did see when Hetty was playing, It was Radish that stayed up there, and Hedman was kind of working with the number 2 unit a few times. So, when it comes to that, where does Dastu fit in beyond the rest of this season if Radish is here or if Radish is not? Interesting situations for management and coaching staff to figure out. Glad I don't get paid to make those decisions.
You should be. That's my humble opinion. Mytho says Braden Point is back. Cooch is dominating out there. Defense looks great as well. Vasi in Vezina mode. It doesn't get talked about a lot. I mean, it should. I think people look at Vasi and they want the same Vasi that we've seen when the Lightning were winning cups and closing out series with shutouts. But I don't know. I think the goaltending collectively has been very solid this year.
Yeah, and with Vasi, right, like you always wonder how a player is going to come back from back situations.
Yeah. Right.
And the surgery, any back surgery is major surgery. There's no such thing as minor back surgery. Right. But I think part of the reason why he's not jumping off the page at people anymore right now, despite the good numbers that he has, is he doesn't have to make the wow saves because the Lightning are playing better in front of him, but he doesn't have to make those saves. He'll make them every now and then. I mean, the Scorpion save against Edmonton still boggles my mind that he stopped that shot in overtime on Roslovic. But he just has to be the guy to keep his team in games when there are breakdowns, right? And Johansson has done that. I mean, remember the stop that Johansson made in LA on a breakaway?
I do.
I could have made it a 2-goal game. He made the stop, then the Lightning find a way to come back and win that game in regulation. So I mean, Vasi hasn't been called on to make as many of those saves because, it's been a couple of days since I looked at this because it was interesting. The high danger chances, right? And there's different places that track these numbers and there's different definitions on how they utilize the data. But the one that I go to, the most natural stat trick, had the Lightning as giving up the fewest high danger chances in the league, 5-on-5. So you can see this is a far cry from a couple years ago where the Lightning were among the top teams in terms of the high danger chances. So Vasi was having to face 6, 7, 8, grade A chances all the time. Now it's not as many. So he's not jumping off the page at you in terms of the way his play is, even though the numbers are kind of back to numbers that we're used to seeing from Vasilevsky for the most part. He's led in a few here in the last couple of starts, but I think at one point it was like 14 out of 20 starts. He allowed 2 or fewer goals. That's the guy you need to help you win games. As far as Braden Point, it's nice to talk about Braden Point being back to Braden Point. Wasn't that way to start the year. Didn't look dynamic. Now he looks dynamic.
I'd say that's – you want to start talking about why we feel maybe the power play is also going to be better. I think having Braden Point be Braden Point is going to help in that. Yeah. I don't know where he falls ultimately when it comes to being a face-off guy. I don't know if he's ever going to be an elite guy at that spot, although I think it's something you can work at.
You can get better.
But, I think he just needs to be incrementally better in the face-off circle. But if you get back to being a 40 or 50 goal scorer, I think you can live a little bit more with those face-off results.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, Steven Stamkos was not a good face-off guy for the first 6-7 years of his career.
Yeah.
He worked at it, got better at it, and all of a sudden now he's 56, 57. Like, he's a pretty consistent guy. So you can get better at it. You just need to learn to cheat better.
That's right.
That's what it comes down to.
Wait, you know what I heard there? Erik Erlendsson says the Lightning will acquire Steven Stamkos for face-offs. I love social media. Yeah, rein it in. Jason says, saw the Athletic had Moser at number 5 for Norris rankings. Eric, any insider info on what Moser did this offseason to really come on strong? Clearly exceeding the expectations I had as a fan.
Well, I think he's been very open in talking about getting his first taste of the playoffs last year against the Panthers and the style of play. So he, like we saw in preseason, much more physical in preseason than we saw his, last year. And look, he missed some time last year with the injury, missed a couple of months. But I just think he came in this year with a different mindset, an understanding the level he had to get to be a consistent defenseman in the lineup and what he was going to have to be doing to help his team be successful. Right. And I think you talk about getting into the right environments for players, getting into the right locker rooms, team culture, however you want to classify it. We know that the demands that this locker room puts on anybody that comes in. And I think Moser saw that, got a taste of it last year in the playoffs, and just knew his game had to be better. So I don't think there's any sort of revelation to JJ Moser. I think it was just an understanding. And what is he, 24 years old? So he's kind of getting to that stage of his, I don't want to call it development anymore, but of his career to where we're in the 300 game range at the NHL level, where guys start to figure it out. I just think JJ Moser is starting to figure out, and I think he's been very open talking about how that series against the Panthers last year opened his eyes to it.
Let's see if we can get one more in before we sign off. Local Nomad says, Lightning have a light schedule this week. Do the players prefer having that? I assume the veterans do for sure.
It's a good question. There's no doubt you like the opportunity to get a little bit of rest. But I think players would tell you they do like being in a routine, right? They like being in a flow. And it can be demanding. And certainly, a year where you have the Olympics where you're going to be off for 3 weeks compacts the schedule for sure. So I don't think they like the compactness of this schedule, but they understand why it's happening this year. So I think to get was a 1 game in 6 days before they face Philly on Saturday to start a 5-game road trip. I think they'll take the rest. I think they'll take the opportunity. And coaches, because coaches don't get the opportunity on this type of a schedule to get a lot of practice days in, right? The Lightning were able to practice yesterday. I think they have a practice schedule tomorrow. They have a practice schedule on Friday. So they're going to get in 3 practice days, or at least scheduled to get in 3 practice days this week, to where, you're not going to run them to the ground, but you can make sure that they kind of keep the flow of the schedule and everything else while not having to, go up against a team that wants to put you through the wall. So I think the rest is welcome in a schedule like this, but I think overall they probably enjoy. I think any hockey player will tell you they enjoy the flow and the repetitiveness. They're such creatures of habit, a lot of them, that they liked, because everything we say it, we joke about it, but it's true. Yeah. It's game day, practice day, or travel day, or off day. There's 4 days in a schedule. And those are the 4 days, right? So that's all they need to know. And I think a lot of them will tell you they enjoy playing more than practice, but I think coaches like to have the practice to get them, to get things kind of back in line. Absolutely. That's what coaches do.
This was a lot of fun, man. Hour just went by just like that. Flew by. We will talk to you tonight. And where can people read your work?
Yeah, the website is lightninginsider.com. You have 2 opportunities. There's a monthly plan. There's a yearly plan. And we're actually coming up, I think in 3 days will be the 9-year since it launched. 9 years since it's launched. It's crazy for me to think it's been this long. Prices haven't gone up in 9 years. So that's something that you can kind of put on your plate, that how is Erik doing this? And I haven't gone up on the prices. So, if you want to support the local media, support the local media.
This is how you do it.
Yep.
Beautiful. And you're with me again tomorrow.
Yes. Yeah. That'll be fun. Yeah. We'll have a lot to talk about, I think.
We will. Pat Maroon in for Espo tonight on the radio call. So how about that? We're getting everything.
Interesting. Wow.
We're getting everything.
Must listen to radio tonight.
Appreciate you, buddy. I will catch you at the rink.
All right. Sounds good. Be well.
All right. There he is, Erik Erlendsson. Thanks to Steve Versnick and Jared Johnston. And all of you guys for listening. We always appreciate it. I am Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.